20 black cars, sleek as predatory insects, surrounded Elara's house. Through her grimy kitchen window, she saw men in charcoal suits emerge in unison, forming a perfect perimeter around her crumbling porch. A cold tremor shot down Elara's spine. The damp dishcloth she was holding dropped soundlessly to the floor. The synchronized purr of their engines died, leaving a silence more terrifying than the sound. Curtains twitched in every weathered house. A tall figure detached from the lead car and started walking with deliberate steps toward her front door. Elara's fingers went numb. A frantic thought echoed. What did I do? The knock that followed was polite, firm, and world-ending. What had she done? 24 hours ago, she was invisible. The answer was in the rain. One day earlier, Elara Mills was invisible. At 27, her world was measured in coffee stains, counted tips, and the relentless, aching fatigue in her feet. At Bonds Unspoken, we believe every heartwarming story, whether between humans or their animal companion, deserves to be told and heard. If you agree, please like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you can join us every time another Bond speaks louder than words. She worked a graveyard shift at the Last Stop Diner, a box of flickering fluorescents and vinyl off the old highway. It was the kind of place where the coffee was bottomless and the hopes of its patrons were just as diluted. Her life was a spreadsheet of lack, rent, her mother's pills, groceries. Dinner was often a customer's leftovers, discreetly boxed. Pride was a line item she deleted long ago. That particular night, the universe seemed to underscore her loneliness. A cold, relentless rain hammered the diner's roof, a constant drumbeat against the windows that blurred the world into streaks of neon and darkness. The iconic Last Stop sign outside buzzed and sputtered, its red glow fighting a losing battle with the gloom. Inside, Elara was the only soul. She moved through the silent space, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum as she wiped down the already clean counter for the third time. The clock's slow tick was her only company. The storm had chased away even the usual truckers and night owls. She was just wrapping up, her stomach gnawing with familiar emptiness, when the bell above the door jangled a harsh, startling sound against the rain's white noise. Elara turned, expecting a soaked trucker. What she saw instead made her heart clutch. It was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 9, a small, drenched figure silhouetted against the storm. He stood there shivering violently, water pooling around his worn-out sneakers. His clothes were thin and torn in places, plastered to his skinny frame. But it was his eyes that got to her, wide, haunted, and hollow with the kind of hunger that went beyond food. He didn't come further in, just hovered by the door, as if afraid to dirty the floor. His voice, when it came, was a tremulous whisper almost swallowed by the rain. "Ma'am, please, do you have any food? I don't have money." He swallowed hard, his small shoulders hunching. "I can clean. I can wash dishes. I'll work for it." Elara's gaze flickered, almost against her will, to the small, wrapped plate on the counter. Her dinner, a grilled cheese sandwich and a cup of yesterday's soup she'd been warming for herself. The only thing she'd eaten since a dry piece of toast at noon. The hunger inside her twisted, a sharp, physical plea. She looked back at the boy. Raindrops traced lines through the grime on his cheeks. He wasn't just asking for food. He was offering the only currency he had, his labor, for a basic human need. A war erupted silently within her. Logic, forged by a lifetime of scarcity, shouted, "You need that food. You have nothing to spare. Your own cupboards are nearly bare. Someone else will help him." But as the arguments raced, her eyes stayed locked on his. She saw the slight, uncontrollable tremble in his lower lip. She saw the way his small hands were clenched into fists, whether from cold or determination. She couldn't tell. The careful, hard-shell practicality she'd built around her heart developed a hairline crack. In that moment, he wasn't a stranger. He was just a kid, cold and scared in a storm. And she had food, without a word. As if moving on autopilot, Elara turned away from the door. She pulled the plate from under the counter, her back to the shivering boy. Her mind was blank, her actions pure instinct. She popped the sandwich into microwave, the hum joining the symphony of rain and ticking clock. The smell of melting cheese began to fill the small space. What was she doing? This was her meal. This was her one comfort at the end of a brutal shift. The microwave beeped, a sharp sound of finality. She took a deep breath, grabbed a spoon, and poured the soup into a clean bowl. The decision was made. She turned around, the warm plate in her hands, and took the first step toward the boy and a future she could never have imagined. The warm plate in Elara's hands felt like the only solid thing in the swirling, rain-lashed world. She knelt, bringing herself to the boy's eye level, and placed the food on the nearest booth table. The grilled cheese steamed, its golden crust glistening. "Come sit," she said, her voice softer than she'd used in weeks. "You don't need to work for it." For a second, the boy didn't move. He stared at the food with a wild, almost animal caution, as if it might vanish or be snatched away. This wasn't the reaction of a simply hungry child. This was a hesitation of someone who had been disappointed by the world too many times. Then the primal need won. He shuffled forward, water dripping from his sleeves, and slid into the cracked vinyl booth. Elara watched as he picked up the sandwich with both hands. He didn't just eat it. He disappeared into it. His eyes closed for a second on the first bite, a shudder of pure relief running through his small frame. The hollow look in his eyes began to recede, replaced by a focused, desperate gratitude. He ate methodically, savoring every mouthful, occasionally wiping his mouth with the back of a still-trembling hand. "Slow down, sweetheart. It's okay. It's all for you," Elara whispered, sliding the bowl of soup closer. She leaned against the opposite side of the booth, her own hunger momentarily forgotten. A knot tightened in Elara's throat, sharp and hot, as she watched him eat. This wasn't just pity. It was recognition. She knew that hunger. She wore its shape every day. But on him, it looked like a crime. "What's your name?" she asked, partly to fill the silence, partly to remind him he was a person, not just a stomach. "Leo," he said between careful sips of soup, not looking up. The name suited him, small but with a quiet, latent strength. "I'm Elara. You get caught in this storm, Leo." He nodded, finally meeting her eyes. "Was walking. Got lost. The lights from the sign." He gestured weakly toward the flickering last stop beacon. It had been a lighthouse in his personal storm. As the immediate edge of his hunger softened, Leo's shoulders relaxed. He became more present, his eyes darting around the empty diner before settling back on Elara with open curiosity. "Do you own this place?" he asked. A sad, wry smile touched her lips. "No, I just work here, very late, when everyone else is asleep." "It's nice," he said earnestly, as if the worn-out diner were a palace. "It's warm." He said like warmth was a rare and precious commodity. And for him, perhaps it was. Elara's earlier internal war was gone, replaced by a calm certainty. This was right. Seeing the color return to his cheeks, the life flicker back into his eyes. This was worth a missed meal. She got up and poured him a small glass of milk, placing beside him without ceremony. He looked at it, then at her, and a single, clean tear traced a path through the dirt on his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. When the last drop of soup was gone and the final crumb vanished, Leo sat back with a deep, contented sigh that seemed too big for his body. The shivering had almost completely stopped. He slid out of the booth and stood before her, suddenly looking formal and grave. "Thank you, Miss Elara." His voice was clearer now, firmer. "My dad, he's going to thank you, too. For real. One day you'll see." The statement was so earnest, so conviction-filled, that it caught Elara off guard. It wasn't the casual, "my dad will get you back" of a child. There was a weight to it. She pushed the feeling aside. This was just a grateful kid making a fantasy promise, a small piece of magic to pay for a sandwich. She crouched down again, her knees protesting. "Leo, listen to me. You don't ever need to thank someone for being kind. It's just what people should do." She tapped a finger gently on his chest, over his heart. "You remember that, okay? If you have it, you share it. That's all." He nodded solemnly, absorbing her words as if they were a sacred instruction. Then, impulsively, he stepped forward and wrapped his thin arms around her neck in a tight, damp hug. He smelled of rain, damp wool, and tomato soup. For 3 seconds, the aching loneliness in her chest didn't just crack, it vanished. He let go just as quickly. I have to go. He'll be worried. There was a new urgency in his voice, a shift from lost child to a boy with a destination. Leo, wait. It's pouring. Where will you go? I can call someone. Elara started, rising to her feet, but he was already moving toward the door, a newfound energy in his step. It's okay. I know the way now. Thank you. He flashed her a smile, a real bright, transformative smile that lit up his entire face. And then he was gone. The door swung shut behind him, the bell jangling once more before falling silent. Elara rushed the window, pressing her palms against the cool glass. She could just make out his small form, a shadow darting between the cones of light from the street lamps, before he was swallowed completely by the curtain of rain and darkness. The diner felt suddenly cavernous, hollow, and 10 times emptier than before he arrived. The only evidence he'd been real was a small puddle of water on the linoleum by the door and the empty plate on the booth table. She walked over and picked up the plate. The ghost of warmth was still on the ceramic. Her stomach growled loudly, a sharp reminder of her sacrifice. She carried the dish to the sink, the weight of her own fatigue crashing back over her. Just a hungry kid, she told herself, scrubbing the plate clean. You did a good thing. That's it. She repeated it like a mantra. But Leo's final words echoed in the quiet, a strange, haunting refrain beneath the drumming rain. My dad. He's gonna thank you, too. For real. One day you'll see. As she turned off the diner lights, plunging the room into gloom broken only by the sickly neon glow, Leo's words were the only thing left glowing in the dark. One day you'll see. A promise or a warning. Sleep, when it finally came, was thin and restless. Elara dreamt of rain that fell upward and a boy's voice echoing in an empty diner. She woke not to an alarm, but to persistent plink, plink. Plink of water landing in the tin bowl she placed beneath the worst leak in her ceiling. Gray, soupy daylight filtered through the single smudge window of her studio apartment, illuminating a world of damp and decay. The air smelled of wet plaster and loneliness. Her morning ritual was a study in scarcity. Bitter instant coffee, a count of her mother's dwindling pills, the hollow pang in her stomach ignored. As she dressed in her cleanest waitress uniform, a faded blue with a stubborn ketchup stain near the hem, she mentally braced for another 16 hours of work. She was shrugging on her thin coat, keys in hand, when the sound first registered. It wasn't the usual growl of Mr. Henderson's pickup truck or the sputter of the city bus. It was a low, rhythmic rumble, smooth and powerful, growing steadily louder. It was a sound of money, a sound completely alien to Oakwood Lane. Curiosity, that fatal human instinct, drew her to the window. She nudged the curtain aside with one finger, peering out into the misty morning. The keys slipped from Elara's numb fingers, clattering on the warped floorboards. Parked along the curb, sleek and silent as sleeping panthers, were the black cars. Not just one or two, dozens. They filled the narrow street from end to end, a procession of polished darkness. Her eyes darted from one identical black car to the next, trying to count them, but the numbers blurred into a single, menacing shadow. Before her disbelieving eyes, the doors of the lead car opened. Men in identical, perfectly tailored charcoal suits emerged. Then the next car, and the next, like a dark flower blooming in fast motion, her crumbling street filled with silent, imposing figures. They moved with a chilling, synchronized precision, fanning out, their eyes scanning windows and rooftops from behind dark glasses. A gasp escaped her lips. She stumbled back from the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. Police? FBI? Her mind raced through every minor transgression of her life. An unpaid parking ticket from 6 months ago? Had she accidentally done something at the diner? This was an operation. This was a siege. And it was centered on her building. Outside, the world had frozen. Old Mrs. Gable across the street stood statue still on her porch, her watering can tilted, spilling onto her feet. A teenager down the block had his phone up, recording the surreal scene. The ordinary sounds of the neighborhood, a dog barking, a distant radio, had been utterly silenced, swallowed by the palpable tension and a low idle of 20 luxury engines. A specific figure detached from the group near the lead car. He was taller than the others, his suit a shade darker, his posture radiating authority that needed no badge. He didn't look at the other man. His focus was singular, unwavering. The peeling blue paint of Elara's front door. No. This wasn't happening. This was a dream, a stress-induced hallucination. She pinched the skin on her wrist hard. The pain was sharp and real. The man kept walking, each step measured, deliberate, echoing in the unnatural quiet. He was coming for her. A firm, 3-part knock rang through the tiny apartment. It wasn't aggressive, but it was unignorable. It was a knock of someone who knows you're home and expects an answer. Elara stood paralyzed in the center of her room, her keys digging into her clenched palm. Every instinct screamed to hide, to pretend she wasn't there. But where could she go? They had the building surrounded. The knock came again, identical. Rap, rap, rap. She was going to be sick. With legs made of wet concrete, she forced herself to move. The 5 steps to the door felt like a mile. She could see a silhouette through the frosted glass of the top panel, a tall, dark shape of immense, unknown power. Her hand shook as she turned the deadbolt and cracked the door open, just enough to see out, the chain lock still firmly in place. The man stood there, an umbrella held loosely at his side, despite the lack of rain now. He was older than she expected, with sharp, intelligent features and silver at his temples. He removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were calm but intensely observant. He did not smile. "Miss Elara Mills?" His voice was polished, neutral, devoid of threat, but also of warmth. "Why, yes." Her own voice was a dry croak. "My name is Mr. Sterling. My employer has asked me to escort you. He wishes to express his gratitude to you personally." He said it as if it were the most reasonable request in the world. Gratitude? Employer? Escort? The words bounced around her panic-addled brain, making no sense. This was a mistake. A catastrophic, terrifying mistake. I think you have the wrong person," she stammered, trying to push the door closed. "I don't know your employer. I need to go to work." Mr. Sterling's hand came up, not to force the door, but to gently prevent it from closing. The gesture was infinitely more frightening than a shove. "There is no mistake, Miss Mills. The event occurred last night at the Last Stop Diner. You provided a service." His eyes held hers, leaving no room for argument. "Please, it will only take a moment of your time. Your cooperation is appreciated." Cooperation. The word hung in the air, a thinly veiled alternative. Elara felt tears of pure fear and frustration prickle her eyes. She was trapped. These men could do anything. Who would even report her missing? The diner manager would just curse her for being late. She was about to speak, to plead, when a new sound cut through the tense standoff. A car door opened with a solid thunk. Then a young, clear voice, bright with excitement, called out across the hushed street. "Miss Elara." Her head snapped toward the sound. There, standing beside the open door of the largest black car, was a boy. He was dressed in a crisp, navy blue coat and tailored pants, his hair neatly combed. He was clean, dry, and beaming. It was Leo. But it wasn't the Leo from the storm. This was the Leo from a different universe. The army of suits, the commanding Sterling, they weren't an arrest squad. They were an honor guard. For what? The transformation was so complete, so absolute, that for a heartbeat, her mind refused to connect the two images. The hollow-eyed ghost from the diner and this radiant, well-fed child could not be the same person. But they were, and as he waved eagerly at her, his earlier promise crashed over her with the force of physical blow. "My dad, he's a thank you to..." For real. The world tilted. The fear didn't vanish, but it mutated, swirling into a vortex of utter, staggering confusion. The army of black cars, the solemn men, the commanding Mr. Sterling, they weren't here for a crime. They were here for a thank you. A thank you from a boy named Leo, whose father apparently commanded armies of his own. Time stopped. The street, the ominous cars, the silent men in suits, all of it blurred into a distant haze. The only thing in focus was Leo's smiling face. The chain lock rattled as Elara's trembling hands fumbled with it. She pulled the door open wide, stepping out onto her creaky porch in a daze. The cool morning air hit her, but she didn't feel it. "Leo," she breathed, the name a question and an answer all at once. "Dad, this is Miss Elara." Leo called, turning toward the open car door. His voice was a bridge between her world of chipped paint and instant coffee and whatever world was contained within that black limousine. In response, a polished leather shoe touched the pavement. Then another. A man unfolded himself from the car's interior. He was tall, with a presence that seemed to physically alter the space around him. His coat was long and dark, his posture erect without being stiff. This was not just a wealthy man. This was a man for whom the world moved aside. The murmuring from the gathered neighbors ceased entirely, replaced by a silence thick with awe. He walked toward her porch. Mr. Sterling and the other men subtly adjusted their stances, a protective formation. The man's eyes, a sharp, intelligent gray, were fixed on Elara. He didn't look at the peeling wood or the rusty railing. He looked only at her. He stopped at the bottom of her 3 steps, not invading her space, but commanding it all the same. "Miss Mills," he said. His voice was deep, calm, and carried effortlessly in the quiet. It was the voice of someone accustomed to being listened to. "My name is Alistair Thorne." A faint, almost imperceptible ripple went through the crowd at the name. Thorne, as in Thorne Global Industries, as in one of the most powerful, reclusive figures in the country. "Last night," he continued, his gaze unwavering, "my son Leo was lost, frightened, hungry. He walked for miles in a storm." He placed a hand on Leo's shoulder, drawing the boy to his side. "You saw a child in need. You had no idea who he was. You asked for nothing." He paused, letting the simplicity of the act hang in the air. "You gave him your own food. You showed him kindness when the world showed him indifference. And you sent him back into the night with his dignity intact." Elara brought a trembling hand to her mouth, pressing hard to stifle a sob that threatened to break free. He wasn't just thanking her for a meal. He was thanking her for seeing his son as a human being. Alistair Thorne took 1 step up, then another, closing the distance between their worlds. He was now just an arm's length away. Cameras from phones clicked silently, recording history. "That single act," he said, his voice softening just a fraction, "meant more to me than any business deal, any acquisition, any achievement on a balance sheet ever could. You reminded my son, and you have reminded me, of what truly holds value in this life. Compassion is not transaction. It is a gift, and you gave it freely." He gestured slightly with his hand. Mr. Sterling materialized at his side, holding a simple, cream-colored envelope. Thorne took it. "This is not payment, Miss Mills. There is no amount of money that can pay for what you did." He extended the envelope toward her. "This is a consequence. A direct consequence of the person you chose to be last night. Goodness should have a space to grow. Please." Elara reached out and took the envelope. It felt heavy. With shaking fingers, she broke the wax seal and pulled out the contents. On top was a formal-looking document with a gold seal. Deed of ownership. Her eyes scanned the words. The property located at 17 Willow Creek Lane, fully furnished and free of all encumbrances. It was a house, a whole house, in the quiet, elegant neighborhood on the hill she sometimes bussed past. Beneath it was a check. Elara's eyes scanned the number on the check. Once, twice. She looked up at Thorne, her voice a disbelieving whisper. This is 7 zeros. It wasn't a sum for paying off a debt. It was a sum for building an entirely new life. The air left her lungs. She looked from the papers to Alistair Thorne's face, her own a mass of utter disbelief. I can't, she whispered, trying to push the envelope back. This is too much. It was just a sandwich. He gently refused to take it back. Elara, he said, using her first name with a respectful gravity. You saw a boy with nothing and gave him everything you had. That just a sandwich was your entire dinner. You operate from a principle of abundance in a life of scarcity. The world needs that principle to be visible, to be celebrated. He gestured to the cameras, to the street. Today it will be, you taught Leo a lesson I could not buy for him. Allow me to ensure you have the foundation to teach that lesson to others every single day. Leo couldn't contain himself any longer. He bounded up the steps and threw his arms around Elara's waist in a replica of their diner hug. Please say yes, Miss Elara. You can have a warm house. No leaks. His small voice, so earnest and joyful, broke through the overwhelming shock. A sob escaped her, then another. She dropped to her knees on the porch, hugging Leo back tightly. The precious envelope crumpled gently between them. The tears were for the kindness, for the sheer unreality of it, for the end of a constant, grinding fear she had lived with for so long she'd forgotten its weight. Alistair Thorne watched, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The men in suits relaxed their formation. The performance was over. The genuine moment was theirs. As Elara rose, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, the world snapped back into motion with new, terrifying clarity. The kindness had been simple. The aftermath was a tsunami, and she was standing on the shore, salt air and the scent of expensive car leather filling her lungs. The cameras were still rolling. Her neighbors were staring. 20 black cars idled on her street, and she was holding a ticket to a life she'd never dared to dream of. As Mr. Sterling gently guided her toward the waiting car, saying, "We can take you to see the property now, if you wish," she understood one thing. Her old life, the one of counted coins and leaky ceilings, was already gone. It had ended the moment she handed a hungry boy her dinner. This was the first morning of something new, bright, and utterly terrifying. The house on Willow Creek Lane wasn't just a building. It was a sensory revelation. Sunlight poured through windows so clean they seemed invisible, painting warm rectangles on honey-colored oak floors. The silence was a thick, comforting blanket. For the first week, Elara would wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced the plink of water in a tin bowl would shatter the silence. It never came. The quiet was the loudest, most beautiful sound she had ever heard. But with a shockwave of good fortune came a quiet, persistent anxiety. The check sat in a new bank account, a number so large it felt abstract, almost fictional. The deed was framed on the mantelpiece, a constant, gleaming reminder. She felt like an imposter in someone else's life. What did she do now? The question was more paralyzing than any bill collector's knock. The diner had called. Her job was gone, filled in an instant. Her purpose, the daily grind that defined her, had vanished. She spent days wandering the empty, beautiful rooms, touching the fine fabrics of the curtains, running water in a deep, spotless bathtub. She bought groceries without looking at prices, a dizzying freedom that quickly fell hollow. The gift was a door, but she was frozen on the threshold, terrified of choosing the wrong path to walk through. The idea came, as the best ones do, not in a flash of inspiration, but as a quiet, growing certainty. It started with memory, the look in Leo's eyes when she placed a warm plate before him. Not just hunger abating, but dignity returning. It was cemented by a visit. Alistair Thorne's driver delivered a simple, handwritten note from Leo, decorated with a crayon drawing of a diner booth and a smiling stick figure. "Dear Miss Elara, I hope your new house is warm. Dad says you can do anything now. What will you do? Love, Leo." She stood in her silent, beautiful kitchen, Leo's crayon drawing in her hand. The answer was no longer a question. She would not just live in this gift. She would launch it back into the world. She didn't hire fancy architects. She went back to the old highway and found a vacant space 2 blocks from the last stop, a former greasy spoon with good bones. With a portion of the funds, she bought it. She called it the second plate. The sign went up, simple and hand-painted. The rules were simpler. The menu changed daily, written on a chalkboard. Hearty soups, fresh sandwiches, stews, pasta. Good, simple, nourishing food. And at the bottom, in bold letters, if you are hungry, eat. No questions asked. Pay with kindness if you can. There were 2 payment options. A modest, fair price listed for each item. and a second, much larger chalkboard on the sidewall. It was headed, "Today's Kindness tab." Below it, anyone who could pay for their own meal could also sponsor 1, 5, or 10 anonymous second plates for those who couldn't. The first note on the kindness tab read, "For the next guy who's having a worse day than me." The board filled with handwritten notes of dedication. "For my mom who struggled. For the kid who needs a break. Because someone once helped me." Opening day dawned bright. Elara, wearing a simple apron, stood behind the counter, her heart pounding as it had the day the cars arrived. The first person to walk in was a grizzled trucker. He eyed the chalkboard, the clean space, the smell of fresh bread. "This no-questions thing for real?" he grunted. "It's the only real thing in here," Elara said, offering a smile. He nodded slowly, ordered a coffee, and paid. Then he walked to the kindness board, took a piece of chalk, and scrawled, "For the next guy who's having a worse day than me." He paid for 2 meals. By noon, the cafe was humming. People who could pay did, many adding to the tab. People who couldn't sat at the same tables, ate the same food, and were treated with the same quiet respect. Some stayed to wash dishes, sweep, or tend the small herb garden out back. Dignity was on the menu, right beside the tomato soup. A sleek, dark car sometimes pulled up in the late afternoon. Leo, now often accompanied by a discreet guardian, would burst in, always heading straight for the kindness board at a sponsored meal, with a drawing of a smiling sun. He'd sit at the counter, doing his homework while Elara worked, chatting about school. He was her loudest, smallest ambassador. Alistair Thorne never came inside, but Elara would sometimes see the car idling down the street, a silent, approving shadow. The story, of course, got out. The Waitress, the billionaire, the charity cafe. But the media cycle moved on. What remained was the community. The second plate became more than a soup kitchen. It became a neutral ground, a place where the city's invisible lines blurred over shared food. Elara hired a few of her old, struggling neighbors from Oakwood Lane. She ensured her mother had the best care. In a sunny room that overlooked the garden, the crushing weight of scarcity was gone, replaced by the purposeful, joyful weight of generosity. One evening, as she was closing up, Elara wiped down the main chalkboard. Below the daily menu, she had painted the cafe's only permanent words. They were the words she'd spoken to a shivering boy in a storm, now etched in crisp white paint for everyone to see. "You don't need money to be kind. You just need a heart that remembers how to be human." She stepped back, looking at the words, then at the warm, empty cafe. She thought of her old, cold apartment, the relentless rain, the choice over a single sandwich. Her life hadn't changed because a billionaire rewarded her. It had changed because she had chosen, in a moment of profound personal cost, to see another person's humanity. The cars, the house, the money, they were just the universe's dramatic way of clearing the debris, of making space for the person she already was to finally breathe, grow, and bloom. She turned off the lights, leaving the kitchen light on over the kindness board, which was already half full for tomorrow. Outside, the old highway hummed. Somewhere out there, someone was hungry, lost, or afraid. But there was a light on now, a plate waiting, and a simple, radical rule: no questions asked. The smallest act of kindness, offered without expectation, is a pebble dropped in a still pond. You may never see the farthest shore it touches, or the ripples that return to you in ways you cannot imagine. Give, not because you have too much, but because you understand what it means to have too little. The world may not arrive in 20 black cars, but always find a way to echo your heart. If stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Bonds Unspoken. Every click helps us share more incredible moments that celebrate the bond between humans and animals. And be sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that reminds us what true loyalty feels like.